Good evening and thanks for joining us. The top stories today. As California's governor closes beaches, he tells Californians freedom may be just days away, but some counties have defied him and have already started to reopen. Joe Biden denies assault allegations from a former Senate staffer. Now he wants any sexual harassment complaints against him 27 years ago to be made public. Canada's Prime Minister announces a ban on assault-style weapons. The decision comes days after a gunman killed 22 people, the worst mass shooting in Canada's history. Gold has been on the rise since the start of the year. We look at how government aid packages and the recent oil crash might affect the gold market moving forward. And Chinese authorities take issue with one woman's gift of Bibles and masks to her family in China. Beaches in California are deserted today after the state's governor ordered them closed. Yesterday saw protests against his continued lockdown. The governor says freedom could be just days away, but some counties have gone ahead and reopened anyway.
California is among a small handful of states tightening restrictions as the majority of the nation takes steps towards reopening.
Open California! Open California!
And restless residents are not thrilled. A protest sparking in San Diego Friday.
Americans under the Constitution have a right to assemble, they have a right to pursue happiness, and this draconian effort is definitely government overreach. We're standing on principle.
The protest took place the same day orders to close some beaches went into effect. City council officials voted to try to block the governor's order, but the request was turned down by California's Superior Court.
Because the damage from what's going on now in this country, in this state, is worse than a virus.
While the beaches will stay closed for now, Newsom says more freedom and looser restrictions are right around the corner.
We're getting very close to making really meaningful augmentations to that stay-at-home order. We are, we said weeks, not months, about 4 or 5 days ago. I want to say many days, not weeks.
But some California counties aren't willing to wait on Newsom to give them the green light. One county letting nearly all businesses reopen yesterday, even bars and restaurants. Other counties preparing guidelines for businesses to open soon. State Senator Jim Nielsen, representing the counties, saying the situation is dire, in a statement saying some workers only have $20 to their name. Melina Weiskup, NTD News.
And more states are announcing their plans for recovery, but Massachusetts isn't one of them. The state's now seeing the highest number of daily cases in the country.
New Hampshire, Indiana, and Oregon. 3 more states are now tacked onto the list of 38 that are loosening restrictions on businesses. Now, 41 states are on the path to economic recovery. That includes universities, which in some southern states are letting students come back this fall. While some colleges are working on reopening plans, the University of Texas has more weighty responsibilities on its to-do list. The U.S. Department of Education is asking the school for more transparency about their relations with China. In their letter to the university, the department says the school has received nearly $13 million worth of contracts with Chinese state universities and Huawei Technologies. But the letter says it's not clear if the university has reported all dealings with China. And in New York, 200 to 300 people are still dying each day from the CCP virus. But that's down from the roughly 700 daily deaths the city saw until recently. Fewer people are being admitted to hospitals, and fewer new cases are appearing each day, significantly less than weeks ago.
Was also down a little bit, 831. It had been relatively flat at about 900 every day.
That's not the case in Massachusetts, which now has the highest number of daily new cases, around 2,000 every day. All residents are to wear masks in public now under the governor's new order. Massachusetts and New York are the hardest hit in the nation. They're among 12 states expecting a slower economic recovery. Ohio is on that list too, being the latest to extend the stay-at-home order to the end of May. Melina Weiskup, NTD News.
Sexual assault allegations against the presumptive Democratic presidential nominee are boiling over. Joe Biden is asking the Senate secretary to make public any complaints made against him.
Joe Biden has denied his former aide's sexual assault accusations. He's also asked the Senate Secretary to search for and publicly release any complaints of sexual harassment made against him 27 years ago. 56-year-old Tara Reid said she filed a complaint against him that year after Biden allegedly sexually assaulted her while on the job. In a televised interview, Joe Biden said that Reid has a right to say whatever she wants, but added that the atmosphere in his office was not like that. President Trump, on the other hand, said yesterday Reid's accusations seem very credible. The White House press secretary said they're happy to know Biden has taken action.
We are pleased that the former vice president has decided to go on the record. It took him less than, 16 hours to follow the advice of the President of the United States and come out and publicly address those claims.
The New York Times is urging the Democratic National Committee to also thoroughly investigate the presumptive Democratic presidential nominee. But Biden has repeatedly refused to ask the University of Delaware to run Reid's name in his Senate tenure records. The university told the Epoch Times that it will release his records once they finish processing them. Miguel Moreno, NTD News.
A Navy warship will remain at sea until further notice because all of its crew members are free of the virus. The Navy would like to keep it that way.
On any given day, the U.S. aircraft carrier Harry S. Truman can be found off the Atlantic coast of the U.S., probably somewhere between Virginia and Florida. Its crew would love to come home to their families, but they can't. They're just too valuable right now. That's because the Truman is a clean ship, free from the CCP virus. That's why the Navy has kept them out at sea. The 4,500-member crew was deployed in November. In some ways, the Truman is one of the world's biggest quarantine bubbles. Besides being frequently disinfected, the ship's day-to-day activities are much the same as before the pandemic. No testing or social distancing required. Every entry onto the ship carries risk, so the Truman has stopped everything but tightly controlled resupply flights. The Navy doesn't want to put a date on the Truman's return. The Pentagon has warned adversaries that ships such as the Truman are by no means the exception, and the U.S. military remains ready for war despite the pandemic.
Days after a gunman killed 22 people in Canada's worst mass shooting, the nation's Prime Minister announcing a ban on military-grade assault weapons, including 1,500 models and variants of firearms.
In the wake of Canada's worst mass shooting, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau on Friday announced a ban on military-grade assault weapons.
We are banning 1,500 models and variants of these firearms by way of regulations. These weapons were designed for one purpose and one purpose only: to kill the largest number of people in the shortest amount of time. Effective immediately, it is no longer permitted to buy, sell, transport, import, or use military-grade assault weapons in this country.
Trudeau said upcoming legislation would include a fair buyback program for people who currently own these firearms. A gunman armed with weapons that included an assault rifle killed 22 people in a 13-hour rampage last month in Nova Scotia. According to the CBC, police said the shooter used firearms that were obtained in Canada illegally and from U.S. sources. Friday's ban will further tighten Canada's gun controls that are already stricter than those in the United States.
The price of gold fell in recent days, but has been rallying since the beginning of the pandemic. Investors see gold as a safe haven during times of uncertainty.
Since the beginning of the year, the price of gold is up over 10%. Compare that to major indexes like the NASDAQ, which is down 4%, or Dow Jones down 16%. Gold has historically been a safe haven for investors during times of uncertainty.
For thousands of years, gold has acted as a hedge against uncertainty, it's acted as a currency, and it's acted as a store of wealth.
As lockdowns bring business to a standstill, countries like the U.S. have been forced to print money to stimulate the economy. This has helped to prop up stock markets, but the increased supply will devalue the currency itself.
They are printing more paper money in every country via every Treasury Department, via every central bank. Gold, relative to those paper currencies, becomes more and more valuable.
As lockdowns are lifted and the virus is brought under control, you may see investors move towards higher risk bets again. But change always brings opportunity. The recent oil price crash has made gold exploration companies an even more attractive investment.
As oil drops and gold stays at the same price or moves higher, the ramifications for producers are significant because one of their large input costs has moved lower.
Will the gold run continue? We'll wait and see.
Can China be held responsible for the global pandemic? To sue the regime in an international court is nearly impossible. But our France correspondent David Vives spoke with a civil liberties lawyer to get his thoughts.
The CCP virus has killed over 240,000 people across the globe and paralyzed economies. Beijing has been slapped with around 10 lawsuits, from Missouri and Mississippi to private companies in Europe to UK leader Boris Johnson. According to experts, China has violated Articles 6 and 7 of the International Health Regulations. The IHR is a treaty that China signed and is legally obliged to uphold. In France, members of parliament want to bring the regime to justice. Guillaume Peltier, vice president of a conservative parliament group, is one of them.
Guillaume Peltier said that China and WHO should be held responsible for the crisis. He calls for the creation of an international health court on the model of the International Criminal Court created in The Hague in 1998.
But is it possible to bring China to international court? According to French lawyer Pierre Farge, no state can take legal action against another state or nation. It's an issue of sovereignty. In other words, the U.S. can't force China to accept any lawsuit.
Here's an example. After 9/11, some states in the USA filed a suit against Saudi Arabia, and it's still going on. On first instance, this suit has been rejected because of the sovereignty issue.
The U.S. wants the UN Security Council to pass a resolution identifying China as a source of the virus. It's a claim Beijing has denied. According to Farge, neither the UN Council nor the International Criminal Court can do anything. But there's one solution that could work.
That's if European countries and maybe the US come together and hold China responsible and decide to impose an independent investigation on Chinese soil. We saw Australia try to impose this investigation, but failed. One country can't really do something, but if many countries come together, China won't have the power to refuse in the end.
Report by David Vives, NTD News.
In contrast to other European countries which are lifting measures, France is extending its lockdown and imposing new restrictions.
Even though most European countries are lifting their measures, France is extending its state of emergency. Not only are they extending the current measures, but also imposing a new one. Travelers to France, including French citizens returning home, will now face compulsory quarantine. In Germany, a cruise ship with nearly 3,000 crew members on board is in quarantine after one of the members tested positive. The entire crew had already been in isolation on board for over 4 weeks, and some were transferred onto the ship from other cruise liners. Indian police found 18 migrant workers hidden in the barrel of a cement mixer truck. India's strict lockdown is challenging for migrant workers who aren't allowed to travel home but also don't have enough money to stay in the states where they work. But in the northern part of India, a famous floating vegetable market remains open. After collecting vegetables from wholesalers, vendors deliver them to homes along the lake. Even though social distancing is a challenge, it's still considered safer than going to grocery stores.
Coming up, Chinese authorities take issue with one woman's gift of Bibles and masks to her family in China. Find out more when we return.
Just what exactly prompted Dave Rubin's transformation from woke to awake, as he describes it? What was the personal cost he faced for standing up for free speech and his beliefs? And why does he think it was worth it? And how is this coronavirus outbreak making people rethink social justice? In this episode, we sit down with Dave Rubin, host of The Rubin Report, and author of the new book, Don't Burn This Book, Thinking for Yourself in an Age of Unreason. This is American Thought Leaders, and I'm Yanya Kellick.
Viewers have described China Uncensored like The Daily Show, but about China.
At the beginning, I was super excited when I got 500 views, and now the show's grown to about 500,000 subscribers on YouTube. One episode reached 7.9 million people. I'm a little freaked out that that many people have seen my face. In 5 years, I see China Uncensored as the sole source of edutainment worldwide.
Welcome back. Around the world, warmer weather is seeing an increase in activity outside, but restrictions are still in place at China's tourist hotspots. NTD's Tiffany Meyer has the details.
May 1st is the first day of a 5-day holiday in China. People usually travel during this time, but this year there are still restrictions in place. An official announcement says only 3 out of 5 sightseeing spots in Hubei province have reopened. And one of Wuhan's most famous hotspots is still closed. For those that have reopened, they will only allow 30% of the usual number of tourists in, and they must wear face masks, show their green health code, keep social distancing, and not gather together. Now to China's northernmost province, Heilongjiang. According to state-run media, local authorities in Harbin City have issued an urgent notice. Certain restaurants like barbecues will be closed from May 2nd. A date for reopening has not been announced. According to internal documents obtained by NTD, the outbreak in Harbin is out of control. The leading group for combating the epidemic in Heilongjiang sent a warning letter to its Harbin branch on April 13th. The letter says there's been a coronavirus outbreak in Harbin and cases of community spread are increasing. Now to Beijing. According to local media, in the first 4 months of the year, Beijing's park saw less than half the number of visitors at the same time last year. Visitors must wear face masks and have their temperature taken before entering the parks. Beijing citizens have been told to prioritize prevention and control of the virus, wash their hands frequently, disinfect environments frequently, practice social distancing, air rooms out frequently, and not gather in large groups. In an interview with CNBC, the president of the EU showed support for a proposed investigation into the origin of the CCP virus. Ursula von der Leyen said on May 1st, "We've learned lessons this time," adding governments need to establish an early warning system with robust data. And to do that, they need transparency.
And the whole world has to contribute to that.
Some German, Swedish, and Australian parliamentarians are calling for an investigation into the origin of the CCP virus.
This is for all of us important. I mean, for the whole world it is important.
Giving masks away has become a way for some Chinese people to show love to their families. One woman, however, became a target of the Chinese Communist Party because she sent masks and Bibles from America to China.
Xiu Nuo says she mailed some masks and several Bibles to her family when the epidemic broke out in China. She was shocked to hear her father was harassed by the CCP when the Bibles were discovered in the mail.
My father was taken to the police station to be interrogated. The police officers think I must belong to an anti-Chinese religious movement overseas, or that I might want to bring my family here to fight against China. In short, the police took my father away from home to interrogate him, then quarantined him in very poor conditions, and he had to pay the costs of being quarantined. My father is very old. He was hurt greatly, both physically and mentally.
Xiu donated 6,000 medical masks to a hospital in Los Angeles. She expressed hope that Americans will understand that the Chinese people are also victims of the pandemic and that the CCP caused the outbreak to spread.
I believe many innocent people in the world would not have died if the communist regime and the Communist Party had immediately announced to the world the true information about the virus when it just happened. That is to say, the Chinese regime and the CCP did a very bad thing and cost many people lives. I am very angry about that.
Xiu says during the pandemic she came to understand the true nature of the CCP. She says the regime has slaughtered people and persecuted faith groups and hopes people will learn from her experience and stay away from the communist regime.
Coming up, a new documentary by Michael Moore questions major forms of green energy and is causing a stir among environmental activists. Find out why after the break.
How do we get to this point
Back in December, the coronavirus was already spreading in Wuhan, and the Chinese Communist Party was covering it up and punishing the whistleblowers who dared to report the truth. Their actions led to this pandemic, which now has us, in America, stuck in our homes and losing our jobs. To this very day, the Communist Party is still lying, making it more critical than ever for us to get honest reporting about China. The Epoch Times is able to bring you the uncensored truth because we maintain a network of underground sources inside of China, hidden from the censors of the communist government. For instance, our investigative team has been contacting individual funeral homes, hospitals, and they've obtained leaked internal documents which show that China's official numbers are massively underreported by a factor of at least 10. If you're looking for an honest source of news that can keep you informed and safe, check out The Epoch Times. Go to readepoch.com and try your first month for just $1 and get real journalism delivered straight to your doorstep.
Welcome back. A new Michael Moore documentary is causing a stir among environmental groups. Released on April 23rd, Planet of the Humans sheds light on the flaws of the green energy industry, like wind and solar power.
I don't think the people in charge are near nervous enough.
Produced by Michael Moore and directed by environmentalist Jeff Gibbs, the eco-doc shows solar and wind energy may not be as clean as we imagine, thanks to their heavy reliance on fossil fuels.
The electrical grid that we all use.
Some environmental activists calling for the movie to be taken down. They claim it's misleading and destructive, resulting in movie distributor Films for Action briefly pulling it from its lineup. Based on his study released last summer, University of Toronto energy researcher Professor Pierre Desrochers offers his perspective. He says that while wind turbines and solar panels are relatively cheap to operate, given their fuel source is free, they're costly to build and connect to the power grid. He adds that because the wind doesn't always blow and the sun doesn't always shine, they require constant sources of backup power, including natural gas-fired electricity plants.
Renewable energy is mostly for show. If you look at it with, again, something of a cold analytical mind, you understand that these sources of electricity don't produce very much, so you need a lot of panels, you need a lot of wind turbines. They're completely unpredictable.
Because solar and wind energy can be intermittent sources, there's also an issue with storing the power.
But we feel good. A lot of people will drive by the highway, they see wind turbines, and they're like, well, we're doing our part to save the planet. Whereas in practice, I think that we would have a better environmental performance if we had stuck to nuclear, hydro, and substitute natural gas to coal.
With over 5 million views on YouTube since its release, the documentary brings new discussions on the limits of renewable energy. Reporting by Eric Rusick, NTD Toronto.
Bluebell Creameries has reportedly agreed to pay more than $19 million in fines related to a 2015 outbreak of listeria. The ice cream maker has pleaded guilty to 2 misdemeanor counts of distributing tainted ice cream products. The products were found to be contaminated with bacteria. 3 people died and 10 others were hospitalized across 4 states. Prosecutors also charged the former chief executive, Paul Cruz, of conspiracy for allegedly trying to cover up the deadly outbreak. And in New York, living under lockdown has left people with plenty of time to try new things, like caring for a dog. Hopeful owners are sending adoption applications to animal shelters by the thousands.
As lockdowns remain in effect due to the presence of the coronavirus, animal shelters in the New York City area are facing a potential shortage of furry companions to adopt. Now, nonprofits are doing their best to meet the demand, which has increased by 17 times.
A little over a month, ever since the shelter-in-place and quarantine period began, we've received over 4,000 foster applications.
Foster Dogs Inc. is not an isolated case. Muddy Paws Rescue, another nonprofit organization, is also seeing this new trend.
Our foster applications, generally, we get about 100 a month. In March, we got 1,133. So it was a big month.
All in all, it seems like the increased demand is a pleasant problem for volunteers like Sarah.
While people are sheltering in place, while they're quarantined indoors, animals are really winning. Foster dogs, shelter dogs are really winning in this entire coronavirus experience.
However, there is concern over what will happen to these animals after lockdown ends. Some say that they could be admitted back to shelters as people go back to work and are no longer able to care for them.
And coming up next, some countries are counting on the help of robots to avoid human-to-human transmission of the CCP virus. Find out what the robots are doing after the break. To avoid human-to-human transmission of the virus, some countries are counting on the help of robots.
Argentina is looking for new ways to disinfect public transportation and other frequently visited places. A small robot might make all the difference. A company in the South American country is testing a machine that can sanitize spaces and objects with ultraviolet light. The light emitted from the device destroys the DNA of bacteria and the RNA of viruses. According to the WHO, traditional cleaning methods are only 60% effective, whereas the new device is said to be more than 99% effective. Another advantage of using cleaning robots is that no one has to enter the contaminated room, and Japan is using robots as well. A hotel in Tokyo opened for patients with lighter symptoms who do not need hospital treatment. The hotel is using two types of robots. One robot is programmed with positive messages to help patients stay positive. The other is an AI robot that cleans. An app will also allow patients to record their temperature with a smartphone.
In a rare gathering, thousands of pink flamingos were spotted on Friday in a lake in western India.
A giant gathering of beautiful pink flamingos has appeared on a lake in the Navi Mumbai area. These birds migrate here every year, but clearer skies due to India's lockdown have invited the birds in large numbers. The migratory flocks were in search of a peaceful place to rest, and they found one. Now they're feeding and waiting in huddles on the mudflats. Flamingos are just some of the migratory birds that arrive in India's coastal region in December after their breeding cycle.
And that's all for today's news. Thanks for tuning in. Have a great weekend. I'm Paul Graney.